Hello, everybody. I am your host for this week's episode of Contractor Radio. My name is Nathan Tebedo, and we've got some really interesting information that we're going to bring to you this week, and we're really excited to talk to you about it. It's a little bit tricky information. Many of us have heard lots of stuff around it. We want to create some high-level understanding of what is so important about data. And so I'm entitling this podcast, The Data. And so a few things that we're going to try and address in this is, why is data such a big deal? Why is it important to be paying attention to your data? That might seem like an obvious answer, but data can be kind of tricky. And some people they get lost in it, and they don't know what to do with it. Maybe they have too much and they're getting in the weeds. Other people just decide to ignore it altogether because it gets kind of complicated sometimes. So we're going to talk about what is such the big deal about data. We're told from many wise people to try and make decisions based on the numbers, right? Make decisions based on the numbers. Well, what exactly does that mean? And how do you do that? We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, many people, especially in the small business circle, one of the questions that you might have is, okay, well, how can we analyze and make decisions according to the numbers or according to the data, and kind of still keep our humanity or still keep our culture and not become too cold in the black and white world of what exactly data means? So today I am going to be joined by two awesome gentlemen who've got a lot of experience and expertise in this world, with Mr. Dean Curtis, the founder and owner of Ingage, an awesome partner of ours that builds probably the premier presentation tool that you'll find out there in the world. And he's got some great perspective around that. And then Mr. Chuck Thokey, who, if you listen to this podcast, you know exactly who that guy is, and you're going to get to hear from him as well. So we're really looking forward to diving in, and we're going to do that right after a quick word from the Contractor Radio sponsor.
If you're a window installer, you deserve a simple choice: Andersen 400 series windows. They're the windows contractors trust most based on a 2022 survey of U.S. contractors, probably because they have fewer callbacks and extra peace of mind. And thanks to shortened lead times, they're available even faster. Make your go-to windows Andersen 400 series. Request a quote at andersenwindows.com.
Welcome back to this week's episode of Contractor Radio, where we are talking about the data. Please pay attention to the sponsors we put out there. Those guys make the podcast possible, as well as many of the other things that we do. And if you know us at Contractor Radio and Contractor Coach Pro, we're pretty selective about our sponsors. And so they're at least worth going and talking to those folks and seeing what they do and how they can help you. So I am going to bring in our guests this week, Mr. Chuck Thokey and Mr. Dean Curtis. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So, Chuck, many of our listeners know who you are, but Dean, not many of them know who you are. Would you mind maybe giving us a little bit of background to kind of where you came from, what you're doing now, and maybe you could even just give us a quick rundown on Ingage for those that maybe haven't heard of it yet?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thanks so much for having me on the podcast today, Nathan. It's a pleasure to be here and sit alongside you and Chuck and have this conversation about data in the market. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Ingage. At Ingage, we believe it's just plain wrong that it's so hard to create an amazing presentation, share it with the people who need it, and then measure whether it's actually doing anything for your business. So we, as you mentioned, we make interactive presentation software. Lots of folks in the contractor world use it for in-home sales presentations, appointment confirmations, and lots of different content that they're sharing with their sales team as well as their customers. Personally, I've had the great fortune of being in the technology industry for more than 25 years. I started my life as a classroom teacher and quickly realized that my calling was actually in technology. And I've worked for some great companies: Oracle, Palm, Apple, and I've been here at Ingage for the past 5 years. So my real passion is helping businesses find a way to leverage technology and then using that technology to help them drive efficiencies, improve productivity. And then I think our topic today of data is really helpful in helping drive business forward.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for that rundown. Very much so. Chuck is our resident bourbon and smoking expert. I probably shouldn't say that. Jim would get all pissed off at me about the smoking, meat smoking expert part of that. So sorry, Jim. So, so the first thing, this first question may seem kind of academic, and that's okay. We don't have to spend a bunch of time on it, but I'm one of those people who likes to set some definitions. So when people hear us use a particular word throughout the rest of our time together, they kind of know what we're talking about. Why, first of all, how would you define data, and why is it important?
You want to go first, Chuck?
Yeah, I'll jump in. When you look at data, there's so many different types of data. When we look at data, sometimes when I'm talking about data with a company, I'm looking at all the leads that come in, all the names, address, and phone numbers, and they look at it like, oh, this is so worthless because we didn't get a chance to get them on our schedule. And I'm like, this is a real person that has a house and that has a roof, siding, windows, whatever. So it's data that you can continue to mine through as long as it's within a certain period of time, and you don't get caught by the telephone companies or whatever. But that is one of the biggest pieces of data that I look at. Then you're looking at data such as the data that happens inside your KPIs. And most people, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but most people look at their KPIs and they want to run their business by their KPIs, which they should in many cases, but we can't take the emotional piece out of it either.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we think of, and I'll keep it in the context of what we do, right? So I think a lot of people, when they deliver content to their sales team, they have no idea any data behind it. All they know is I created it on this date and I put it on this server, and I think somebody might have downloaded it, right? So for us, it's really about, are people delivering presentations? How long are they spending? What are they doing in those presentations? And then linking that to other pieces of data to make good decisions, right? So if I had to define data, it's the core, it's the raw material on which we make decisions, right? And data is only that. It's only data, right? It's really just the raw material.
It's information, right? So if you're going to define it, it's just information. So if you're on a sales call and you're asking a prospect information about their experiences or about their home or where they live, their answers to you are data. They're giving you data, and if you're a good salesperson, you're going to be using that information to make decisions later on down the road throughout that process. When you're figuring out what your year-to-date revenue is, that's data, that's information. When you're figuring out what your average sale ticket is, or how long it takes for you to produce a job, those are little just pieces of information that's essentially called data. And so the best way I think is just think of data as information. I mean, interesting, as human beings, we're taking data in constantly. Like right now, I'm looking at you guys, I'm hearing you guys, that's data. And then this tool we're using is keeping track of all the little minutes and seconds and all these little ones and zeros flying around. It's like literally we're surrounded by data. And so this concept of data, based on that kind of definition, every business has data, right?
Too much of it, probably. Right? More than they know what to do with.
That's for sure.
Right. Okay. So where do you find it? So I know I just said data is this huge, giant, broad concept. Okay. But when we do say every company has data, and somebody goes, okay, I've got data, where is it? So if you're a company thinking I'd like to gain something from that, where do they find their data?
Yeah, this is a hot point for me, because I mean, it should be found in your CRM. And if the CRM is if it's customizable enough, because every business is different, the CRM companies have a hard job because they put it out there and they know that everybody's going to complain about it because everybody wants it in different ways. But if they are able to put all the data in all the right places, and the company knows how to separate that data so that it's not all jumbled together, that what you can do with that data is absolutely amazing. I can find out exactly what's going on with every lead source. Not only that, is I can find out what's what salesman is good at what lead source at what time of the day. I mean, so if they put the information or data where it's supposed to go inside those CRMs, and they house all that data in the same CRM, because I've seen many have several different CRMs and they feed off of each other. But if they put it on that in all the data in that CRM, they should be able to mine that data and be able to run the company in such a way that it's streamlined.
Yeah, Chuck, I agree. I mean, data is everywhere. And unfortunately, that means it's on a sticky note on their desk, and it's also in their notebook, and it's on the napkin in their truck. Like it's literally everywhere. And without a central place that everyone agrees should be the place where it goes.
Nathan, we need to make a soundbite of that.
Yeah, there we go. Coaching moment. Hey, data is everywhere, including the sticky notes that are on your desk or fell behind it.
Exactly.
I got it right here.
And that's the problem. So what we try and preach to because remember, even though we're a software company, we're a sales team just like everyone else, right? What are the good processes you have in order to make sure you're capturing all of that data in the right place so that when you're ready to make a decision, you have it all, right? Because it can get unwieldy at times. And I just did an analysis of all of our software systems.
Oh boy.
I'm embarrassed to tell you how many we have. Like, I won't even mention the number, but it's a lot. And the more systems you have and the less streamlined you are in the processes to use those, your data is going to be everywhere. So data is everywhere. So how do you get the processes around it to make sure it's in the right place when you have to make a decision?
Yeah. We have different data receptacles, right? So QuickBooks is a source of data. Your CRM is a source of data. If you've got spreadsheets of some kind that you use for something that those tools don't use, that's a source of data. So when you're putting in a date, or when you're putting in a quantity, or when you're putting in a line item of some kind, or when you're establishing a time frame, or when you're taking in some information from a phone call, that goes somewhere. And so that's somewhere that you guys put that stuff out there in the world, right? That's where your data's at. So if you're going, I probably have this information, where is it? Where do you put your information? I mean, some guys like have a notebook. There's what I had a boss that I used to work with who was a little stubborn on software, and he had what he called it his analog CRM. And it was just a moleskin notebook. It was all it was. Right. So God forbid something happened to him. And the rest of the team needs to follow up and work with these clients because he's out of pocket or something. And it's all on a notebook and nobody knows where it is. Right. Furthermore, you can't analyze it, so that your data is wherever it is that you put information.
And the thing is, you want to reduce those islands of information.
Yes.
Right? Think of them as islands surrounded by water that no one can get to, right? You want to create the bridges between them so that you have all of the data. Again, when you want to make those decisions, get rid of the islands of information. Make sure you have great places where everyone's agreeing on what goes where.
Yeah.
I'm working with an Amish company right now that they're not allowed to use phones. They can't use, so I asked, I says, well, so where are all your files? And they take me to this thing called a banker's box. And they just open it up. And it was, at first I thought I was going to get overwhelmed, and it was almost refreshing. It's like, you know, right where your files are, you know exactly what order they're in, you know exactly. And I asked, where's your sales schedule? And he points up on the wall. And I was like, wow, this is, it was something that blew me away. I haven't seen in so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So we've got these data receptacles. And Dean, you kind of started alluding to this concept a little bit in gathering. Like, we want to try and probably reduce those data receptacles as much as we possibly can, have as few as we can. And if you're listening right now, I'm going to tell you right this second, there is no one single source solution for all of it. Not unless you're going to spend, and I mean literally millions of dollars to build an enterprise level solution that's customized to your business. You're never going to find a one-stop shop for all of that. So just take a deep breath and relax. You're probably going to use multiple different tools and components throughout your business. Okay. So, but that kind of leads to my next question or thing for us to try and flesh out a little bit. How do we then, if we have, even if you've got a company that's got 2 data receptacles or 2 data point places where they put information, how do we take the data we have and make it something that we can read. I mean, you like the word aggregate. We take this information, put it into a place where we can go, okay, I know this thing's happening over here, and I know this thing's happening over here. If I combine those, that gives me a better picture. How do we make our data something that we can read and process?
That's typically done in customizable reports, reports that can if I was wanting to look at all of my sales reps and I want to see all the different data, I would have all the different rows. One row would be how much they sold. The next row would be how many appointments they had, all the way through to my close rate, my NSLI. Everything would be in one long row. So I can see that rep and everything that is associated. So it would be, I guess you say most of it would be inside of a comparable type report.
Yeah. I mean, I think even maybe a precursor to that is, what questions do you want to answer? Right. So a lot of times, you jump to the solution of, oh, I need a report, or I did this with my own leadership team. I'm like, guys, we need X, whatever it is. And what I forgot was, I really wasn't asking them the right question, right? Because we didn't have the data, because I didn't really know what question I wanted to be answered, right? So I went back a step, right, to the higher level of, what question are we trying to answer? To your point, Chuck, like, who is leading us in NSLI? Well, okay, now I know I needed to go to this system, and maybe I have to combine it with this other system so that I can get that level of data to be integrated in one place, so I can actually answer that question and make that decision based on the data. So I think yes, there's tactical things, but there's also strategic things of, oh my gosh, what question do I really need to answer? And most importantly, how does it help me make a good business decision moving forward?
Yeah.
Well, that's the best answer I think I've ever heard, is, what answer are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked for a number of software companies, actually, in my own life. And for those of you that use software and that software company has support, one of the best things you can get in the habit of doing is, when you call the support company at your software, because you want to know if the software can do a thing. Can my software do this, or can it do that? Instead of really asking them because the thing is, you'll end up in this language barrier is what happens. The support people are thinking about their software in terms of what it can and can't do. And you've got this random outside concept, and you're not totally sure how to communicate it. So instead, what you say is, can it do X? Whereas a really powerful way, and a much more efficient way to ask, like a tech support person, would be, I need to know X.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get this product to tell me X? Right? I mean, I'm sure, like at Ingage, you guys run into that all the time. I know that Ingage has some internal data components. And what if somebody was using, Engage software, other type software, when somebody calls out and they're like, hey, I need to know some information. How do you guys deal with those kinds of questions?
Yeah, I'll go all the way back to our product development. Like, literally, the call I was on right before I jumped on this was our roadmap call. And we were going through some, what we call user stories, in order to find some new product features that we're working on. And we don't think about building things in terms of features. We think about problems that we're solving for a customer, right? Mm. So it's kind of that same thing of, what problem are we trying to solve? Not what feature am I trying to build, right? If you think about, I'll take a bit of a diversion, but back to my time at Apple, we were competing against BlackBerry, and BlackBerry had a feature called software encryption. So all of your data at rest was encrypted. But the problem was, it was encrypted with your passcode. So it was done when you entered in your passcode, it was part of the encryption key to decrypt the software, so that it would all happen in software. And everyone that we were selling into the enterprise, they're like, you have to have this. BlackBerry has it. We're like, okay. Well, when Apple came out with it, they did an encryption scheme in hardware, which was infinitely faster, right? So you didn't have to sit there and wait for your whole device to decrypt. It would do it on the fly. So it was just a piece of technology that, answering the question of, what do we want, what problem are we trying to solve, but thinking about it in a completely different way, not just saying, we need to do what the competition does, or we need to do what this other company does. At Apple, we solve it in a very different way. And I think that applies here as well. Like, when you're looking at the data, what problem are you trying to solve? Not, am I just trying to do what everybody else does?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good call out, is really wanting to know what that is, right? The efficacy of our sales team, or the speed with which we're doing production, or if you're trying to find inefficiencies, you're looking for inefficiencies in how your company does things. Where do you start? I mean, I think oftentimes we'll attack the thing that makes the most noise, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. But that squeaky wheel, I found more often than not, is a symptom of something that isn't hardly making any noise at all. And so, if we want to improve something, we've got to be able to get a baseline of understanding of what it's doing now, and then look at the trend, and then figure out those markers along that trend. And that data is really part of what tells us that. So some questions for you, right? Dean, I'll just ask you. I know, and I've talked to your team, and they're like, Dean is a data hound. He loves data. He's always asking for data, and sometimes he wants it faster than I can get it to him. But when it comes to reading data, how do you read your data? And then what is it telling you when you get it? I mean, and you can be specific. I mean, we don't have to be too general. I mean, some folks will probably relate to it, and some of it, because it's software, may not make as much sense, but examples are really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a real example in terms of our product, right? So if, let's say, you're using Engage, or you're using presentation software, and you want to say, hey, is there a correlation between my close rate and the delivery of an in-home sales presentation? Right? I mean, you spend tons of time training on it. You spend tons of resources building it, refining it. There's a link between sales and marketing, understanding, is it really matching the right, the right message that we want to send? Does it have all the products? Are the products up to date? Like, all of that, you spend tons of time in your business making that. So the question is it helping? Like, a real question, is it helping? There's no one metric that says, is it helping? However, if I can bring a few pieces of data together to say, hey, you know what? Nathan is presenting, and the average time that he presents is 64 minutes. And the average time that Chuck presents is 72 minutes. And then we go a level deeper and we say, well, you know what, Chuck, where's that 8 minutes being spent? Oh, it's actually being spent in section 2 of the presentation. By the way, Chuck's close rate, when I look in the CRM, is 10 points higher than Nathan. Sorry, I had to use an example.
Come on.
But how can I correlate that data, right? Independently, it's like Chuck's doing 72, Nathan's doing 64, whatever. But when I can now get deeper and more granular, I can actually maybe answer some of those questions to say, or maybe you guys are both not doing well with financing. And you look at the data and you're like, oh my gosh, neither of these guys are ever getting to the financing slides. Like, come on, fellas, what are you doing, right? And it's not a big brother thing. It's more of a, hey, we know that when Sam got to financing, Sam is actually closing at 7 points higher. And by the way, he's getting X number of basis points for us from the financing company as well. So his average deal size is up, but also he's closing faster, and we're getting some residual from the financing. Like, all of that can be brought together, not because you have a single piece of data, but because you can start stitching them together to, again, answer those questions that you're really interested in answering.
I'm going to show this to my kids, because it's like when you go to school and you got those word problems and you sit there like, I'm never going to use this. Like, oh, yes, you will.
It's funny, Chuck. When I was a teacher, I was a math teacher, and my students, my sixth grade students would all ask me, like, when am I ever going to use this? And my answer was always never. But I said, the skill you're developing is the ability to solve problems. And if you're able to solve problems, you're going to be great in any profession, right? And I think everybody out there, that's what you're doing every day, is solving problems, right? So the more you can do that, the better you're going to be.
So Chuck, you want to put a little bit of kind of your angler perspective on this, how you read the data and what it tells you.
Yeah. So the easy answer is, if you take all the data and you line it up, whether it be per sales rep, per lead source, or for the presentation itself, it all tells a story. When I'm looking at a sales rep, and I just got done this morning with a client when we were going through their data, and I says, look, you got to understand that that John, he doesn't truly buy into the product because he's always selling the good system, none of the better and the best systems, but he's also, all of his profitability is low. So he thinks that the price is too high and he doesn't believe in the product. And so when we're going through this, we can help them understand. Now we have Billy. These are not real names, by the way, but you have Billy that he's always selling the best and his profitability is high and his close rate's low. He's padding his pockets. He's going for the home run every single time. So we now know how to manage our sales teams, but we also know how to manage our lead sources and what needs to happen with, if we're going to use it with Engage. We know what pages they like, what pages they don't. Doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of those pages, but I would like to know why we're only spending 2 seconds on the danger signal page. So those types of things, we want to know why.
Well, and the one thing too that occurs to me is that it's that the information you're getting isn't always just static. So for example, like when you said, Dean, you're like, well, Nathan may be closing at 64% and Chuck's closing at 74%. What's going on there, right? Well, what if one of those two guys has an average higher ticket? So what if maybe this guy over here is closing at a lower rate, but for some reason he's 5% higher when he does close than everybody else. So then you've got these two different angles from which to start asking additional questions like, okay, well, how do we get this guy with a higher ticket up to a higher percentage rate? How do we get the guy with a higher percentage rate up to a higher ticket? And so it's not always necessarily a 1 or a 0. There's numerous other things that you could be looking for, or, how much time somebody spends in the home, right? We really have a hard time. Like we've got this guy over here, he closes at 90%, but gosh, he can only run 2 appointments a day because he's there so long.
Right.
Okay. And then all of a sudden, do we have a customer service? Like, do his clients not like him very much because he's there for 3 hours and won't leave until they say yes? So then you've got this whole other data set over here to start considering how there's so much that goes into it. So how the next question I have has a couple of components to it. How do we make decisions by the numbers? Like what filters should we be using as we look at our data? Or maybe I shouldn't say what they are because they probably vary. And then what are some filters that we should use mentally to look at our data with? And then what influences those filters? And you guys,
I think one thing, data should inform the questions you ask.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole point of, it's funny when people look at our solution, they're like, oh my gosh, people are going to think it's Big Brother while they're presenting. Not at all. It just gives you so much context into what's happening and allows you to ask some really good questions. Hey, I notice whatever it is. Help me understand. I'm not in the home with you. I'm not on those sales calls, nor do I need to be anymore, by the way, because I can see what's happening. I want to understand. Help me understand. You're doing this really, really well. Help share with the rest of the team why, right? So I think the filter is what questions you ask and how you can drive better conversations because of having access to information that you might not have had previously.
I like how Sebastian talks about our co-pilot program in the form of Moneyball. And so if you watch that movie, it's all about data. Everything they do is about data, and they win a ball game based on data, not skill, but data. And he says it's all based on consistency because I can bet on consistency. So that's the same thing with us, is that we're looking for consistency, but also profitable consistency of, if we're more profitable and the person that is off highest product and not doing any discounting, then fine, let's take a look at that. But most importantly, where's the profit and where's the consistency lie?
I was also thinking too a little bit like we have this concept of like the way our economy moves and operates. And so as a business owner, I think sometimes you're looking at financial reports, you're looking at your budgets, your budget to actual, you're looking at your staffing needs, you're looking at your expenses, you're looking at your overall strategy. And sometimes your strategy or what it is you're trying to accomplish is going to have an impact on how you read the data. Like sometimes people go in and they look at their finances because the question they're trying to answer is, can I afford to hire a marketing person? Right. And then some people go into their finances going, how much money am I making? Two different questions to ask, and they're probably going to look at very similar data for that. But I think you should be aware of the filter you're using as you look at your data, because it will impact the decision you make. The numbers are still the same, but you're looking for something. And if you find it, yay, or you find it, boo. Right. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, because I tell you what, we human beings are pretty good at finding things that confirm what we already believe. And so yeah, we're already looking for it. Like, oh, I found a 0 in this place and I was expecting a 0 there. Well, yeah, but is that the only factor that's important there? So I think that sometimes we can approach data with a little bit of our own bias or our own fear or our own expectation. Maybe we have a strategy in mind and we're trying to see if the data supports our ability to initiate or continue with that strategy. Does you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, confirmation bias is definitely real. So you have to be careful when you are looking at your data to be like, wait, let me put it all on the side. Let me ask the question I'm really looking for and go in with eyes wide open to not have that confirmation bias for sure.
Yeah. This sales guy is terrible. Look at that. He missed one deal. We should fire him.
I'm sure we've all seen this. It always is. It's like it happened once.
we had a situation just the other day. So I won't give the specifics of it. Someone's like, I can't believe this is always happening. I was like, okay, well, how many times? I just asked a simple question. How many times it happened in the last week? Once. How many times it happened ever? Once. But I think it might be a trend. Wait a second. That's not a trend. You need 2 points to make a line. Right?
That's right.
Oh man, that is tough, because your emotions will betray you. Your emotions will betray you, especially on the negative things. And I've seen this in contract. Man, every time this crew does this kind of roof or this kind of siding project or these windows, we have a problem. And it's like, maybe it's happened 3 times in the last, like maybe month or 2 months, but you've had that crew for 3 years. So before we go firing anybody, maybe we should see if is this really a thing, or like you said, Dean, how often does this happen? Not very. Seeing it happen a couple times recently might warrant a conversation, but be careful with that, because data will, as long as you can keep your eyes open, it will squash how you feel about a particular thing.
Yeah, recency bias and confirmation bias, 2 very important things to just be cognizant of.
Oh yeah. And believe me, I had it happen to me. I'm like, if I just feel like this thing's happening all the time, and then we pull the numbers and I'm like, all right, well, I guess I need to check myself a little, right?
It just hurt really bad.
Yeah, right. My feelings are just so damaged. Right. So, all right, we're gonna jump into something. We're gonna get a little more human here in a second. And talk a little bit about how some of this matters, what leaders may be looking for, and if you're a manager or you're part of a leadership team, some of the interworkings, and bring the humanity component, which we kind of were leading into with confirmation bias potential there. But we're going to do that right after a quick word from another one of our sponsors.
The Atlas Pro Plus Contractor Program is designed to help you build your business. It gives you tools and resources, training, industry insights, bonus structures, technical knowledge, the brand power and science of 3M Scotchgard, and what we think is the best product and warranty in the industry. Become part of the family that is succeeding and growing their businesses.
We went from nobody ever heard of us to the #1 roofing company in our region.
And we've gone from 12 roofs a year to 20, 35, and we did over 400 last year.
We're on track right now to do 1,000 roofs this year.
You'll begin earning Atlas bucks and rewards as you move up to even greater reward levels. Become an Atlas Pro today.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Contractor Radio. Thanks for taking a few seconds to listen to our sponsors. We love those folks. Give them a little love. Pay attention. Check out their websites. And if you're out and about and you are at an event or something, stop by their booths. Tell them Contractor Coach Pro sent you. As a matter of fact, if you ever talk to any of our sponsors, make sure you tell them Contractor Coach Pro sent you, because most of them take very good care of the Contractor Coach Pro and the Contractor Radio folks. And I know Ingage is one of those people too. So make sure to mention us when you reach out to Ingage to radically and dramatically improve your presentation process in the home. Also, man, Ingage does, we did just as a side, we did kind of a little bit of a training thing with Ingage. All right, sorry, shameless plug. And we learned that Ingage not only has a series of automations that can be built into a process, but it has integrations and communications with other people outside of that. Ingage could function not just as a presentation tool. It could also become part of your training program. It could technically become part of your actual production as well. And so my mind started, if you guys are wondering, how does that happen? You got to contact Ingage, because we don't have time to get into that now. But after I got a chance to get a little deeper into it, I was like, holy cow, this twisted my mind up pretty good on what I could do if I still had a contracting company with Ingage. So anyway, sorry, second commercial. Sorry about that, everybody. But so the next thing I wanted to kind of get into is, so Dean, being your CEO over at Ingage, okay, you, and I know this because I talk to your people, you ask them for information. You ask them for data. You ask, and I'm also guessing that when it comes to them making decisions as leaders and managers in your business, you're probably asking them what data supported the decision that they made. Okay. Yep. So as a leader, as a CEO, as an owner, what are you guys looking for from your people that you would want to see data on? Or how does that apply as a leader when you've got a team below you?
Yeah, I mean, a real world scenario that happened recently, right? We had some folks on our sales team who were doing outbound calling, and we were doing an evaluation of, is this actually, well, one of our core values as a company is what we call is the value of value, right? And it's not like, do you have values? Like, if you don't, you're not going to survive here anymore. So it's, do you value, and do you look for ROI in every resource spent, right? So we do that consistently. I mentioned earlier, we just looked at all of our software systems. I cut out 13 software systems because we weren't using them. And it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was, $50 a month here, $50 a month there. It all adds up in any business, right? So we always look at the ROI of every resource spent. And we were doing that with our outbound calling team. And we were looking at, are we really getting a return on investment from there? And I said, how do we know? Right? It's a real simple question that I ask a lot. How do you know? And so we looked at a lot of the different metrics. We looked at conversion metrics, from calls to connects, from connects to demos, and then the demo sit rate based on those things. So yes, my team knows that I ask for a lot of data, and it's really not as anything other than a check and balance, because our gut can tell us one thing, but the data can help us validate and verify that. So if we can't answer the question of how do you know with something material, then we have to go find that information out.
So Chuck, I know you've also been on both sides of this fence, and are currently on both sides of this fence, and coach people who are on both sides of this fence. So what should be the mindset or approach of a manager when it comes to data reporting? What should they know? Like, if you're a sales manager, production manager, you have somebody that you're reporting to, and that person's probably going to want some validation or verification. And especially, like, if you're setting your sales goals for next year, or you're trying to establish the amount of volume that your fulfillment team can manage, what are some things that people in those positions should have in mind, especially in light of kind of what Dean just said?
Well, first, we all need dashboards. That's what I like about a lot of the really good CRMs, is that they have great dashboards. When you open your computer and there's all the data that you need from the prior day, whether it's here's your close rate for the week, here's your close rate for the month and for year to date, going into, what's my backlog, so that I know exactly if I'm going to go into a meeting with the production department, I know what my backlog is. If I'm going in with the admin, I know what my AR backlog is. So having that data right there in front of you as a dashboard is key. Then you have your drill down. So if anybody is asked for a reporting, you should have the highest level. And we always say the CEO level on top. And I used to have this CEO at Able. He would sit in the meetings for probably the first 20 minutes. That's all he could stand. And so we knew that we had to have very high level data for him. And then once he left, we could do the drill downs to make sure that, the next meeting is better. But again, it's you start with your CEO level data and you work your way into where the drill downs are. Why is the AR where it's at? Is it all in commercial? How much AR do we have in commercial? How much do we have in residential? How much do we have in service? So you have different reporting based on who you're talking to. I hope that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that was good. Dean, you have anything to add in that? I mean, especially that concept of like what information a CEO wants and whether or not they do want to see all the little nitty gritty, or they look at the overall numbers and go, okay, like I'm good with that, or what have you.
I think what's important is not being married to what you're doing, meaning maybe you have a certain set of metrics that make sense for this quarter, but then it's okay to say, is this really helping us to make good business decisions? Should we be considering something else, right? It's the no sacred cows sort of thing. Oh, well, we've always done it this way. Okay, but what if we could grow 10% faster if we did it another way? And are there other metrics that are more meaningful, even just cyclical metrics? Like maybe because like Q3 for us is a slower quarter because a lot of contractors are out there installing stuff, right? They're not selling maybe as much now, they're out installing. So, okay, what are some other metrics we need to look at in Q3 that might not be as relevant in Q4 or Q2, right? So I think also just being aware of the cyclical nature of your business, not holding on to things that might not be providing value to you anymore, and being open to your leadership team coming and saying, you know what, I've noticed this trend. Can we add this to the dashboard? Great. And let's watch it for a little while. Maybe it's not relevant, but maybe it is. So being open to those kinds of changes, I think, is also really important.
Yeah. Don't take that personally.
No, gosh, no.
And I mean, it's hard not to sometimes. If you're in the organization and you were tasked with putting together all this information, all this data, and you built this spreadsheet, you built this dashboard, you can go all this kind of stuff, and then somebody comes along and goes, you know what? Let's try doing it this way. And you're like, I've been working on this thing for a year, so like be sure as a leader, like especially if somebody's got a bunch of time, that at least make sure you show some appreciation, because a lot of people put a lot of work into putting information together and getting that thing out there. And so, you want to make sure that they didn't spend all that time for nothing. Right. So that one's for free.
We just added a couple metrics to our product reporting dashboard as a result of a conversation we had in our leadership team meeting of what's happening with this. I don't know. Well, do we have a metric that we can start tracking to see it? Yeah. Okay. Let's add that and let's take a look at it over the next 6 weeks and see what we see. Right.
That's right.
And it may disappear in 6 weeks. We're like, nope, it wasn't valuable. Great. We'll remove it.
This is more of a distraction than anything else. Right?
Totally.
Okay, so I know that for some people, especially people who are very culture obsessed, they're very concerned about the culture of their company. They're concerned about putting people first. They're concerned about their personality and just the humanity that's involved there. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, the larger, more corporate you get, the more data is proliferated, and then a data point seen somewhere near the top of the leadership chain, there's a human being behind that somewhere near the bottom, right? And so there's a fear, and I think it's a valid fear, where somebody just looks at data and then starts making decisions about people's lives based on ones and zeros. And so if a company becomes data obsessed and running their company by the numbers, can that ruin their culture?
It can if it's not deciphered correctly. I mean, numbers are cold. They're very cold. And you could look at a number and immediately say this person needs to be fired. And when you look at it, it's like, well, I think that we can change their attitude. I think that we can train them. I think that we can, whatever, before we make the decision based on the number that is beside their name. So, I mean, you got to look at it and run the company by the numbers, but how you decipher and disseminate that information to your team has to be, I'm very big on throwing the right cross or hitting them right between the eyes, but it does need to come to the team in such a way that it's not demotivating.
Yeah, I mean, we use three main big metrics that our company marches to, and those numbers drive, literally, if you're doing something that's not driving those three numbers, we question what you're doing, right? So we always try and tie it back. So I think it can be used as a real motivator too. One is a revenue goal, one is a customer satisfaction goal, one is a growth goal. It's like, if we're not getting to that customer satisfaction, towards that growth, towards those revenue targets, so it can be, I think it'd be greatly motivating as well, because it's very simple. When you wake up, we say, when you wake up and you come to work every day, is what you're doing today driving one of those three things? And if it's not, pause, ask yourself why you're doing it, or go get some direction from someone who can help you redirect so that we make sure we're hitting those three, right? Now, if you only build your culture around those three things, probably not a great way to live, right? Yeah. Because you want to give, like we give our engineers what we call 10% time. And they have 10% of their time where they can work on things that really are additive, that may not tie to those top three things. They usually do, but might drive some innovation, right? So you have to be flexible in terms of the numbers, and you have to build things in, buffers in, so that you can have the humanity in it, so that you can also innovate, right? Because the innovation side could spur something that you never even planned on, right? But there are, at the same time, the other side of that coin is sometimes you have to be clinical in your decision making.
I like those guidelines in there too. And I thought that 10% time is super cool, because
it's very cool.
They may be working on something at the moment and it's necessary and it's needed, but they may be just like, man, this is like, especially like software folks. There's things they really, really love doing. And then there's things they know they got to do and they just don't really like doing it. And I think that's a super cool thing. They've got this opportunity to go, okay, I've been working on this thing for hours at this point. I'm going to take a break from it, work on this really fun thing over here that I'm interested in and passionate about. And it gives them a chance to kind of like break. That's really cool. I love that.
Yep. It's led to some pretty good innovations in our product too, I have to admit. So we just did a rebranding of our whole admin console. And that was one of our engineers was just like, I think I can try this thing. And then literally within 7 days after he tried it, our whole administrative interface was reskinned and rethought and redone in a very, very responsive, cool way. And customers have had a great response to it. So yeah, you have to be careful to just latch onto numbers too much, right? You have to give some creativity. That drives great culture.
Right.
Excuse me, Chuck, did you have something to say?
No, one thing I do want to throw in there, and it goes back to sales, and when we're looking at the numbers and the culture and helping the team understand the numbers, because remember that with sales reps, you have to help them understand what it means to them. And so like NSLI, just as something as simple as your net sale per lead issued, your revenue per appointment. So if you take somebody that earns 10% and you tell them that, hey, if your NSLI is $5,000, just understand that every time you go to your car door, you open your car door, that's $500 you just made. And you're not going to have anybody in the room. Everybody's running to their cars. But again, you're helping them to understand the data in such a way that benefits them.
That is an absolutely brilliant call out. Thank you, Chuck, for that, because that one I kind of slipped past me too. The idea that yes, you can have KPIs and yes, you can have numbers, but those things mean something to you as well. You mentioned it earlier, Dean. I don't want to be just big brother over here. Like, I want to know where you're doing well. I want to know where you're doing well. I also want to know where you need help, because if I know where you need help, then you're not going to hear me, like, a good example is sales meetings, right? We get into a sales meeting and the sales leader goes, hey, what is everybody having a problem with? And then 4 or 5 different issues is thrown out there, and we randomly pick one that maybe only 1 or 2 people are having a problem with. But these people over here aren't having a problem with that. So we're about to waste 2 hours of a large group of our team's time over these 2 things, but these 2 people do need it. Mm-hmm. And so we want to help you improve, like instantly. You know, you don't want to go to training? Great. I'm going to show you some data. This guy over here, he works less than you and he makes more money. Would you like to work less and make more money? Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't know a sales rep that isn't going to say that, right? So, well, here's the data. If you could improve your closing percentage or your NSLI or whatever by these little data points, guess what? You have to run half the number of appointments that you do right now. Would you like that? Yes, I would. Right.
And if you ran the same number, think of how much you'd make it at a higher conversion rate.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a great call out, Chuck, is that this data is designed to help you improve your life. This isn't just about this cold-hearted machine that we have pumping through numbers. And then, you know, the one thing that I was actually in a meeting not long ago going over some cold, hard numbers, looking at different things and looking at the expenses of these different categories and these different things and the profitability and going what works, what doesn't. But I tell you this much, and I kind of put this thought came to my head is like data tends to tell you what happened, but not necessarily why. So you could look at 2 things and say, well, this thing's profitable and this thing isn't. But if those things are related, then you go, well, this thing clearly isn't profitable. Let's get rid of it. Well, hold on a second. Your sales trainer may not be a profitable line item, but these guys over here who are killing it were trained by that person. So does that show up as a profitable line item in its own vacuum? No, it does not. It may not at all. But as it relates to these other things, you might be shooting yourself right in the foot to make a decision like that. So like Chuck said, it tells a story, and it doesn't always have all the footnotes in it. And so it is helpful to kind of know some of the behind the scenes and be involved with because your people do have the footnotes.
Yeah, it definitely drives the conversations you want to have and informs the questions you want to ask.
Yeah.
And then the rest is dialogue, right?
Yeah. So I know we're kind of coming up towards the end of our time here, and Dean, I got a couple of pop questions for you. So these are off topic, but we like to do this with everybody that graces us with their presence on our podcast. So first question. Okay. Now, are you married and have kids?
Yes. Yeah. Happily married, 26 years, 4 children.
Congratulations, 4 children.
Thank you.
All right. So we know that getting married and having your kids is your greatest achievement. We already know that. So outside of that thing, what would you say is your greatest achievement?
Wow.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared for it. That's why
I'm not, I should have, I always try and watch several episodes. I watched a lot of the beginning of some episodes of before coming on. I should have waited to the end. I think one of my greatest accomplishments is, so I think I mentioned earlier, I used to be a classroom teacher, right? And one of the things about being a teacher is, I've always had this ability to just understand and learn quickly. And I think all of what I've done in my career through technology sales and now being a leader of a company, it's all about learning quickly and solving problems, right? So I think one of my greatest achievements is just continuing that. Right. And never kind of settling to be okay. I've always just had this desire to continue learning and continue excelling and continue taking what I've learned from something else and applying it to the next thing that I do. I always joke, this isn't going to be my last job, but it's preparing me for my next one. Right. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that I still have that beginner's mentality of really just trying to learn every day. And I think that's a great achievement, and it's not really an achievement. It's just like setting myself up for whatever's next. Right. But it's something that I thrive on. Is I read a lot and I try and consistently learn. And I hope that when I sit down and, Chuck, like when we're at a conference and we're just talking, I'm always trying to learn something from somebody else. And I think that's an achievement. I don't know if you'd call that an achievement, but it's something that I always strive to try and do.
I can dig it. I dig it. Judges say, good answer.
Okay.
So, next pop question. What is the best advice you've ever received from a mentor?
So this is a very easy question for me to answer. My greatest boss mentor ever was a guy named John Brandon. He was our SVP of sales at Apple, and he had 10 rules. He actually, then he had a second 10, and I have them all. But the number one thing is that I remember from him is everyone sweeps the floor. And no matter where you elevate to in a company, no matter who you are, whether the head coach, the assistant coach, the water boy, if you're whoever you are, everyone is equal on the team. And I think that is some of the best advice I've ever gotten. And I think it makes your team see you not necessarily, because I'm in a leadership position, right? But they know that whatever it takes, I'm going to do that, right? So that concept of everyone sweeps the floor is critically important.
Did he actually make people sweep the floor?
No, he tells it. His story was he worked for Adobe, and John Warnock, who was one of the founders of Adobe, he tells a story about John being under the projector on the floor, like plugging things in, and how that's where he learned that concept around everyone sweeping the floor, seeing the CEO of Adobe under the fixing the projector so that they could have the sales meeting or something.
I love that. That's super cool. I dig it. Okay. All right. So we only get so much time on this planet, right? And unfortunately, we're not entirely sure how much that is. So when it's all said and done, what are you hoping to be remembered for? Or what would you like for your legacy to be?
I would hope that the people who I've met, that I've challenged them to be better than they were than when they met me, right? That through our interactions, that they see that there's always more that you can strive to learn, and there's more that you can strive to be, and that I would have done my job to challenge them to move maybe beyond their comfort zone, to say, you know what? I met Dean and he challenged me to do X, Y, or Z. And even if it wasn't a direct challenge, it was just how I live my life, or how I run a company, or how I lead a team, or how I give a talk, or whatever, that they are like, maybe there's something more that I can do. And I would have influenced them in some way. And I don't ever need to know about that, but if that is something that I did, I'd feel amazing about that.
Man, that is a great answer. You could also, like, anybody you have a conversation with, you could just like give them $5, and then it doesn't matter from there on out. They'd be like, "What do you think of Dean's?" Like, "Well, I got $5 I didn't have before."
Got to carry around a lot of fives around. That's right. Next time I see you, Chuck, if I don't give you $5, I've failed.
So we're going to be right back. We're going to break for just one more quick word from our sponsors, and then we're going to wrap this up with Dean. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you're a window installer, you deserve a simple choice. Anderson 400 series windows. They're the windows contractors trust the most, based on a 2022 survey of U.S. contractors, probably because they have fewer callbacks, an extra peace of mind. And thanks to shortened lead times, they're available faster. At Contractor Radio, we believe in promoting the best, like Anderson 400 series windows. So request a quote today at andersonwindows.com.
Welcome back to this episode of Contractor Radio. Thank you guys so much for joining us and taking time to listen to this, paying attention to our sponsors. We hope that this has been helpful for you. We really hope that, I guarantee that not all of it was probably pure gold for you, but we really hope you pulled at least one or two solid things away from that, even if it just means carrying around a stack of $5 bills. So, I just want to say a big thank you, Dean, for you being here. I know you're a busy man. You got all kinds of stuff going on, but you took your time out of your day to talk with us and to our listeners about their data, how important it is. And so thank you so much for being here. Chuck, also to you for taking some time out of your day to have a little different angle and a little different perspective on this conversation. So guys, I want to wrap this up. What would be one gold nugget you'd throw out there to these folks that are listening before we close her out?
I guess my gold nugget would just be that go back through your reports, make sure that they actually mean something, that it's not just we even have just a big long list of reports, and I look at 2 of them. You know, it's just everybody keeps putting more and more, and it just gets to be a big jumbled mess. So go back through, figure out what you need, what you don't need, so that you're not confused, or you're just not looking through a big pile of rat's nest.
That's a good one. That's a good one. How about you, Neen?
Yeah, I'll steal from John Brandon's top 10 again, and this one is fix the roof while the sun is shining. And, I think a lot of contractors right now have a nice backlog and a healthy pipeline of business. And I think a lot of times that can mask issues in other areas of your business, whatever it is, data especially, right? So what are those things that when things are good now, that if you just took a little bit of time each day to examine the processes, the systems that you have, that while things are really good, when they turn south, potentially, hopefully it doesn't for anyone, but maybe there's some efficiencies and some things that you can improve while things are going really, really well, whether that's spend or whatever it is. I'm sure there's tons of things in your business that you can look at, fix that roof while the sun's shining.
That is perfect way to wrap up. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for Contractor Radio. We'll see you on our next episode.